It's Philip and Anna Ashton from Dunolly. We're recording Yvonne English on the 20, what's the date
8th,
today?
I think.
The 28th of December in 2023 in Timor, which is not that far from Dunolly.
Actually, we're in Bowenvale.
Bowenvale.
Oh, no, we're not in Timor. We are in Bowenvale.
Timor's across the road.
Okay. Right, ready to go. Ready to roll.
Ready to go. Well, what sort of was your early childhood like?
Well, what I can remember, I was born in Brussels in 1935. My father was working there. He'd been working in France for 12 years and then they moved to Brussels as another factory had another factory to look after in Brussels. So I was born in Brussels. But then I can't remember much about Brussels at all, except I can remember being taken to see San Nicola just before we left and being allowed to choose a doll. But we had to leave because of the outbreak of war in 1939, so I'd be 4. And we had to leave as refugees because we left it late. And we were allowed 1 bag each. I can remember that quite clearly, getting onto that boat. And we were allowed a bag each. My mother, clever mother, had made us a little knapsack each out of cushions with straps on. So my sister and I was allowed to take the doll I'd got for Christmas. And my brother was at boarding school in England. You get down. And we left Dad behind, which I was horrified about. We had to leave Dad behind because he had to close down the factories and look after all the men and what have you. So off we went to England, and when we got there, we went to Hull because that was where, in East Yorkshire, that was where my parents came from. But there was a lot of bombing and raids, and Mum said, I'm not staying here. We were staying with relatives. So we moved to Derbyshire until Dad came, where her great aunt, my great aunt, and my great grandmother lived. Lovely little village in Derbyshire, and I can remember that really clearly. Because for the first time in my life I had freedom. I ran with the village kids. I got into lots of trouble, I think. And it was just beautiful. Derbyshire is just a beautiful, beautiful county. And we went lovely long walks, and I loved that time. I know we had Christmas there, and I can remember the snow was right up here. I was only a little girl, but the snow was right. They, dug channels down. And then Dad came back. He got out on one of the last boats across the channel with nothing. He came with nothing except a tennis racket. He'd been going to play tennis when they said Germans were coming in. And he just ran, he just left. And then, so Dad came, we had to go back to Hull. And I can remember that, and back into the bombing and the things where we were living. Mum didn't like where we were living because we hadn't been there very long, and the air raid went, and I can remember we all got underneath the stairs. What a silly place to get, but we all got underneath the stairs, and there was this terrific bang, and Mum said I didn't stop screaming. I just screamed and screamed and screamed. Next morning, my sister and I went out and looked. The whole row of houses behind us had gone. And as a child, I didn't realise that people had gone with those houses. I just looked at the flattened houses. So then Mum said she wasn't going to stay in that area, and we moved to another area. The most beautiful house in the avenues, the sort of posh area. The people were leaving. They wanted Mum to, we only rented it, they wanted Mum to be there. And it was a beautiful house, 3 stories. I just loved that house. In Westbourne Avenue, there was a coach house, and my bedroom was over the coach house, and at the end of the garden there were stables for the horses. It was a romantic house, beautiful staircase and tessellated floor all the way through the hall. Big house, servants' quarters, and anyhow, that's where we lived. And then I went to school there, of course, near where the bomb fell. It was a long way. I stayed at that school because it was a nice little school. Anyhow, when I was about 7, my sister had made friends, and one of her friends went to dance school. and she wanted to go. Mum said, well, if you go, you've got to take, poor Margot, you've got to take your little sister. I was 8 years younger. So she had to pull me along with her. So along we went to this ballet school. Well, it wasn't a ballet school, it was a dance school, and it was social, just a social school. And I was terribly shy, really shy. So I just sort of stood at the back and just sort of copied people. And it was held in a building that was a whisk drive. And under the stairs there was a little shop, but they sold lemonade and chips. Tuppence for the lemonade, I think, tuppence for the chips. And I think the lessons were like threepence. I mean, nothing. It wasn't an organised thing. We all went at the same time on a Saturday afternoon, all ages. Started off with ballroom dancing. And the big girls helped the little girls, and we did waltzing and polkas for the Velita. Yeah. And then we did acrobatics, high kicks and splits and shouldering. And I was really good at that. I found that was something I was really good. Very loose-limbed. I could do the splits, I could do shouldering. So that was one thing I sort of starred at. And then we did a little bit of dancing, national dancing, Greek dancing, and ballet. Not as an organised class, a little bit of port de bras, a little bit of bar work. But the thing was, we sat and watched the older girls doing their little bit of port de bras and there. So we learnt by watching, I suppose. And then I did that for I don't know how long, and then started to go twice a week. And the weekday class was a little bit more serious. You didn't do all the ballroom dancing, you just did the dancing. And we started to do Royal Academy exams. I had no idea what I was doing because I stood at the back and just watched everybody else. So my first exam, I had to go in by myself. The only thing was that all the steps in ballet are in French. When my mother realised that, she was delighted because we had to do theory, and they'd asked the little girl before what a glissade meant. She didn't know. And Mum said, it means to slide or glide. Oh, okay. So when I went in, they asked me, oh, slide or glide, I knew that. And I scraped through grade 1 somehow or other. And, but then Mum started to take an interest in what I was doing, and I started to practice a bit at home, and she started to teach me what some of the other steps names meant. And yeah, so and then the next thing that happened was that I went in Hull. We had a musical festival. Hull was actually, and still is, a very musical town, and they encourage the arts, and they had this musical festival, and all the ballet schools went in, we all went in. It was all it wasn't like the Stedfords here, it was all just very relaxed and easy. But we all learnt a little dance, and I learnt a ballet dance, and I learnt a character dance, a Norwegian dance. I learnt a little acting dance, which was called the Lost Linnet. And my sister had helped me with that a little bit, acting that out, losing my linnet in a little cage. Oh, my dad had had a little cage made for me to carry on. And a Greek dance, Greek dancing. And along we all went, and I wasn't the favourite in the ballet school because I was shy. I never showed what I could do, but I got on stage and it was different. And I performed, and I won the ballet, and I won the character. And when we went back in the afternoon, there was a silver cup. I said to my mum, I'm going to win that bit of silver. I didn't say silver cup, bit of silver. I'm going to win that bit of silver this afternoon. She said, go on with you. No chance. No chance of winning it. Yeah, I won it. By the scrape of my teeth. I had to have the highest marks of all the ages. And by 1 mark I'd scraped in. And they soon, my sister soon put me in my box. She said, you're not as good as, the older girl. I said, well, no, I'm not. But in my little section, but, soon squashed. But anyhow, I won the silver cup. And that was really the start of my family getting behind me and encouraging me and helping me. And we used to go across the water to Cleethorpes and do competitions there. And I did win everything, just because when I got on stage, I performed, I suppose. I just had that sense of performing. So going on further, I think it was in 1949, the Sadler's Wells Ballet. The festival was on, the whole festival was on, and the Sadler's Wells Ballet Company were in town at the same time. And we went, Dad always took us to all the ballets and anything in the theatre, Dad took us to. So we were, you know, I loved going to plays and musical things. And anyhow, I'd done the musical festival, I'd come first in everything. And the next day, a friend of my dad's rang and said, I've rung the Sadler's Wells Ballet and I've arranged for Yvonne to have an audition. Would you allow her to go? And my dad said, well, we'll find out whether, you know, whether it's worthwhile going on, won't we? Yeah, okay, you can go and do the audition. So I went for this audition, and it was actually the lady who watched me was, I got to know her really well afterwards. She was only young, she was 19. She was ballet mistress. Her name was Barbara Fuster. And she asked me to do a few things, and then she asked me to do the dance. I did it without music and without warming up, you can imagine, you know, just cold on stage, no lights, just in no atmosphere, nothing. Anyhow, I did that. But she said that she thought I had a lot of potential and that I should audition for the school. So we went, a bit later we got a letter from the school to say that Mum had to, you know, apply. And we were asked to go to the school to London. So I think that was, I said here, we travelled down to London. Oh no, that's another bit. Anyhow, we travelled down to London maybe 2 or 3 months after that first audition. And when we got there, I can remember getting there, and the room was packed. It was 2 buildings at Barons Court, the school at Barons Court, Collett Gardens it was called. It was 2 buildings with like a glass walk-through place in between, and that was packed full of people. And as we got there to the door, my mum said, well, we might as well go home now because you don't stand a chance. And they were all children from professional schools, all beautifully attired. And it was, you know, it was wartime. You couldn't get things, you know, you couldn't get clothes and leotards and tights and things like that. And my mum, we'd just seen Red Shoes, the ballet Red Shoes. They filmed Red Shoes. And Moira Shearer had a little crossover blouse which tied at the back with black tights. So my mum had made a little turquoise blouse tied at the back with a bow, and I had black cotton tights on. And I was about the only child dressed like that. Everybody else was, you know, dressed up. Yeah. Anyhow, we went in groups of 4 into a room and had to do part of a class. And Madame de Valois said to me, "Pull up your knees, child." And I said back to her, apparently, in a broad Yorkshire accent, "It's me tights, the cotton, and they bag at the knees." Carried on with my thing. And when I came out, I told Mum. She told me to pull up my knees, but she said yes. As she walked through, she was laughing, talking to somebody else, and saying one of the children, one little girl said her knees were baggy because of her tights, because they were cotton, and she was laughing. So the thing is, I brought attention to myself, I suppose. And people were asked to leave, and there were about 200 people there when we got there. And we had to stay, and in the end there were 3 of us left, and everybody else had gone. And then Mum was called in, told, we had a medical examination, and then Mum was told I'd got into the school and could join the following April when I turned, May I joined when I turned 15. And the other two, Anne Page and David Shields, they both got into the company as well after me. And that was unusual because because you were in the school, you didn't naturally go into the company. A lot of them just didn't get in at all. Maybe 2 in the class got in, 2 or 3 in the class. But anyhow, I got into the school I had to wait until the following May. In the meantime, I had mumps, I think, and a scarlet fever, just to help me on my way. But anyhow, it came, and I travelled down to London with Mum, and they took me to my digs, which were, told you, Ealing Broadway, way out, Hammersmith, that's the in-between station, Ealing Broadway. And there I was in my digs, and Mum said goodbye to me. I said, will you come and see me tomorrow? And she said, yes, I'll come and see you tomorrow. And as she went away, my sister-in-law, who was later, my sister-in-law said to her, no, you don't. You don't go back and see her. You just leave her there now until the holidays, which would be about 10 weeks' time. Anyhow, I shared a room with a lovely little Welsh girl. They all went to the ballet school. All the girls, about 6 girls, all went to the ballet school. And one was Annette Page. She was the eldest, who later became a ballerina. And she took me to school the next day, and which was fine. I can remember being totally in awe of everything, but anyhow, she came to me during the day. I had another class in the afternoon, and she said, oh, I'm going home now. You'll be able to get home by yourself. I'd never been on a tube train. Well, I had, but I'd always been with other people. But anyhow, I said, yes, I suppose so. And she said, well, just change it to Hammersmith, look for the Ealing Broadway train, and then get off at Ealing Broadway, and then you know your way back to the digs. Yes, I suppose so. Anyhow, I got home, and that was my start at the school. And I started in the lower class, made some wonderful, wonderful friends, really good friends. Best friend, Deirdre Dixon, Shelley Bateman, who was a Cockney, a really streetwise. Deirdre had been in a company before. She'd danced before in a company, so she was very knowledgeable. And then there was a lovely Canadian girl, Diane Foran, and a lovely American girl, Margaret Watson. And her mother had come over from America and was staying in a flat in Mayfair they were rich, with Margaret. That was wonderful because we'd all go back there for tea, and we'd have wonderful teas with scones with jam and cream and things we didn't get in England because they'd be sent out from America. And those were my friends, my dear, dear friends at the school. When I started to perform, I didn't know how to put makeup on. And funnily enough, in those days, they didn't teach you at the school. They do now. And our makeup was quite different to what it is now. It was quite heavy, grease paint. So it was Deirdre who took me to the chemist to buy my grease paint, my 5 and 9, 5 all over your face, 9 on the hat for the highlights, red things, and showed me how, and false eyelashes, showed me how to make my eyes up. We used to soap out our eyebrows, cover them completely, and then draw our eyebrows higher, give you a bigger thing. Anyhow, she taught me how to do that. She taught me how to do everything. She was wonderful. They were so kind. They were just lovely. And she was magic on stage. I'd watch her on stage, and she had a presence. I don't know what it is. Some people have it and some people haven't, but she was just gorgeous. Even walking on as a little page, you'd look at her, you'd notice her. And we did walk-on parts as students. And not just in ballet, we do walk-on parts in operas as well. And when I look back, I can't believe how lucky I was to have heard and seen so many wonderful things. We were in operas like Carmen, Aida, Gosh, what else? Carmen, Aida, I remember. Carmen, I remember, because the dancing was fine. I loved the Spanish dancing, and that was fine. They didn't tell us, they didn't really rehearse us for the other things, and we had to be part of a tavern scene. And Shirley, my friend Shirley, was wonderful. She sat on the men's knees and she laughed. And I think I stood there and went, Shirley. So at the end of the performance, our ballet mistress came down. She said, Yvonne, dancing fine, but you're much too straight-laced. Well, when she went, I had to ask what straight-laced meant. No idea. So I had to learn to act and be part of it all. Aida was wonderful because we were priestesses and slave girls, and we did, amazing. Aida was an enormous opera as well. It went on forever. We all wore wet brown. We were all together in an upstairs dressing room, and at the end of the show there was one bath, which we only allowed a bit of water because we were at the top, only a little bit of water. We all stood in, all 12 of us, in this water, can you imagine, and washed the wet brown off us before we went home. Oh dear, it was just amazing. Oh, I know the other thing I was in was Gluck's Orpheus with Kathleen Ferrier, the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful singer. She only did a few performances. We were blessed spirits. And I can remember her coming on stage and being wowed by her, just saying out loud, oh, what a wonderful voice. And the stage manager, I can remember saying to me, Kathleen Ferrier, you idiot. But I just didn't know who she was. You know, I'd never heard of her. But after that, she just had, and she was ill, she had cancer. And we only did about, I think, 4 or 5 performances, and then she became too ill to perform. And she wrote us a letter. Well, I think we all put together and sent her some flowers, and she wrote us a letter to my blessed spirits. I wonder who got that letter. But it was up on the board. But that was heartbreaking because she died soon after that. So I feel so privileged to have been actually on stage with somebody like that. So that was opera. I mean, not to mention the ballet side of it. And we did some wonderful ballets because it was just after the war, 1950. And so the company was, I think the country was, they were trying to cheer up the country by putting on, you know, lovely shows and things. So we did Sleeping Beauty, and we did Sylvia whilst I was with the company there. These were big ballets. Swan Lake, of course. I think one of the first dancing parts I did was in Sleeping Beauty, one of the nymphs in the last act. I'd never seen them, and then I was pushed on in it. I don't know how I managed, but yeah, and lots of other, you know, lovely ballets like Patineur, Skaters, and so I was with that company. Oh, I haven't said how I got into that company. I used to do walking on parts, and then the company went to America. When they came back, a few of the girls left, so it left a few places. And my father had actually been to see Elaine Phillips, the headmistress, to see if there was any chance of me ever getting in the company. And I can remember him saying to me on the way home, she says, there's nothing wrong with your work, it's perfect, but you're much too shy, you don't push yourself forward enough. And she thinks you might not make it. So he said, Dad said, I'll give you till the end of the year and then you'll have to come home. And I can remember I embarrassed him by bursting into tears and sobbing loudly all the way home in the train. I was on the train. Poor Dad. Uncontrollable I was sobbing my heart out. And anyhow, the company came back, and I think 6 of us got in the company. I think I was the last one to scrape in. I was the youngest one. I was 16. The others were all 17 or 18. But 6, and my best friends, all my best friends, we all got in together. And we were just about to get in, and they did Daphnis and Chloe. That was the other big ballet they did. It's a beautiful ballet. Beautiful music, and we were allowed to sit out front. I thought I'd arrived in heaven. I really did. We sat out front and watched this beautiful, beautiful ballet. And there's a chorus as well as the orchestra. There's a chorus sings in it. Absolutely amazing. And then, of course, we started touring, and touring around England, and the glamour goes out a bit when you move away from Covent Garden, because touring was hard. And we'd tour for about 8 weeks, and you had to write ahead to get digs, and landladies who would, professional landladies, theatrical landladies. You had to write ahead and book yourself in. But I was lucky because I had these good friends. So we used to dig together, 2 in a room, sometimes 3 in a room, sharing a double bed, I might say. It was no glamour, and the food was pretty rough because you couldn't get things. I actually toured with a ration book, so you had to hand your landlady and an identity card. We still had identity cards to travel with. And those, that was sort of brought you down to earth a bit. It was, and England, you can imagine, grey, cold, damp. And digs, and the theatres, sometimes the stages were not very good, and dangerous. But we had to travel, we then didn't have physios and people with us. If you injured yourself, you just carried on if you could. A lot of us had things like septic toes, and I can remember going to the doctor with my friend Shirley, and she had like red lines right up her leg from septic toes. You just carried on. So there's a lot of glamour, but there's a lot of hard times as well. But I stayed with that company. I went to America. There was a coronation of the Queen. That's another thing that happened whilst I was in the company. In that company, that was the big company at Covent Garden. The Queen's coronation, in which Frederick Ashton did a ballet called Homage to the Queen. And it's in that thing. And there's, I was a water nymph it was water, air, fire, and earth, I think. And I was water with Violetta Elvin. I was one of the nymphs, 6 nymphs with Violetta Elvin. And that was a dramatic day, actually, because I can remember we had to get to the theatre early because the roads were all blocked because of the coronation. And so we had to get to the theatre very early, and we were allowed to have, which we always could between meals, we had a meal in the crush bar. And that meal in the crush bar for dancers, can you imagine? Little slice, little bit of ham, a few lettuce leaves, tomato, and 2 half slices of bread and butter. That was our thing. I don't think there was anything else. I don't think there were desserts or anything. But we thought that was quite good. We thought that was fine. But anyhow, we had tea, and we were all ready, put our makeup on. We always wore dressing gowns in the theatre. And went up and we had a meal there. And I'm sitting having the meal with my friends, and I've got a lovely young man sitting next to me, Leon. And he suddenly grabbed my arm and started tipping backwards. And I went with him. He went back in his chair, and he just went back, and he was having an epileptic fit. I didn't know. I thought he was dying. I went down on the floor with him. One of the girls, Anne Heaton, must have known about them. She immediately came, turned him on his side, got a spoon, put it down. And I was hysterical. I was absolutely hysterical. I thought he was dying. And they took me out into the foyer, and I'm sobbing my heart out. Anyhow, I had to pull myself together. He was taken off in an ambulance. I had to pull myself together. He'd been out all night waiting to see the Queen go back. He'd sat up all night and he was just overtired. And that was what brought that fit on. But I didn't know all that. I didn't know anything about epileptic fits. And anyhow, I had to pull myself together, and we did the performance. And halfway through the performance, I look up, and there is Leon standing in the wings. I thought it was a ghost. He'd recovered, and they'd let him out. So that was the coronation day. I did feel sorry for the Queen. Can you imagine? They went through all that day of all that pomp and ceremony. Then she wasn't really all that keen on ballet, but then they had to come to a performance in the evening. Princess Margaret loved ballet. She used to come and visit a lot, but the Queen really wasn't all that keen. So that was the coronation in 1953. And then later on in that year, we went to America. We went to America for 4 months, and that was just the most amazing eye-opener for somebody who'd just been through the war. And we got to America, and it was like Wonderland. We stayed in New York for 6 weeks. At first, it was all too much for me, but I got used to it. At first, it seemed all lights and brush, but I got used to it. We stayed in a hotel, I mean luxury for us, you know, not digs. And the hotels were all paid for. That was the other thing. We had to be paid the equity salary. So everything was paid for, our digs, not our food, but the hotel was paid for. We just all we had to do was pay for our food. So the older members of the company had advised us younger ones to leave most of our salary behind, so we'd have a little nest egg when we got back. And yes, 6 weeks in 6 weeks in New York, it was just amazing. The food was amazing. Food we'd not seen before. And bread, because in England you only got one sort of bread. You were lucky if you got a loaf of bread, and that was on a coupon. But there, the bread, they'd say, you'd ask for a sandwich and they'd say, oh, rye, or amazing. The food was absolutely amazing. So, and we travelled, we had our own train with Sadler's Wells Ballet on the front of it. And it had sleeping carriages in it, because sometimes we were in the train for 4 days. And it had sleeping carriages in it, and in the back, and there was, of course, a restaurant car, and then in the back all our scenery and stuff would be carried in the back. And yeah, it was amazing. And we slept all together in one carriage, if you know, boys and girls all mixed up. The seats would be turned into an up and down, and yeah, it was all just, we had our own bunks, as it were. But we're all mixed up. Amazing. And I had, my girlfriend was down below, I think I was up above. And then just in here in private rooms, Margot Fonteyn, Violetta Elvin, all the ballerinas and the leading men. And whilst we're in New York, Margot Fonteyn re-met Tito. He'd been her boyfriend earlier, and then they'd broken up. He was Armenian. They re-met, and she really fell in love again. And I can remember her coming to get on the train with that like radiant look on her face, and as we all looked at him, I said, what on earth does she see in him? But anyhow, that was it, and that was Margot in love. And she got on the train, and as the train left, she came out with champagne, and she said, I'm celebrating. And all her little paper cups, you know, and she poured us all a little cup of champagne. And I can remember it bubbled over, and she said, oh, behind your ears, rub it behind your ears and make a wish, which I've done ever since. And we all cheered her in the champagne, yeah. I forgot to say as well, whilst I was in New York, my brother arrived in New York with the St. Paul's Cathedral Choir, because they were touring as well. So I was able to spend a day with my brother in New York, looking at the sights, which was lovely. Yeah, and then off we went on our long tour. As I say, 4 months, sometimes one night stands, sometimes we'd spend 4 days in the train. The food was fantastic. We went right through the Rocky Mountains, which was amazing. I can remember a friend, I think more than one friend, I think a few of us got off the train at one place. You know, you'd be on the train for 4 days, and we stopped at the station. We said, "Are you stopping long?" "Oh yes, you'll be all right, you can get out and go and buy something." So we got out, I think in our dressing gowns and slippers, and the train went off without us. And they had to take us by car. They had to stop the train at the next station. Take us by car to the next station. Oh gosh, it was an amazing tour. We performed in all sorts of places. We performed in ice stadiums, because I suppose they could get a big audience. And so the stage was built on the ice. Can you imagine what that was like? And we were doing things like Swan Lake and Sylphied, little laid on the stage, over the ice. That was really an amazing tour. What else about America? We had Christmas there. Freddie Ashton went as Greta Garbo, I can remember. Margot Fontaine went as Miss Dior. We all dressed up, it was fancy dress. And we had a Kris Kringle, so everybody gave somebody a present. And I've actually got the original list of who gave to whom on that for the Christmas, which is amazing. But yeah, that was a wonderful, wonderful tour. The shops, the things, we sent parcels and parcels of clothes home, because there were things there that we hadn't seen, and I sent parcels home for Mum and for my sister and my little niece, who was only a baby. I sent masses of lovely baby clothes home for her. It was fantastic. And anyhow, eventually we came home after Christmas. I think we came home in the January, late-ish in the January. We went back to New York before we went home. And on the way, we just set off, and I looked out at the plane window, and there were flames coming from what looked like an engine. And, is that normal? And everybody sort of looking, and then so we're having to turn around and land in Newfoundland. One of the engines is failing. So we got to Newfoundland, and we had to stay overnight, and it was freezing. It was freezing. We were put in motels, but it was freezing cold, and some of the girls had taken sleeping tablets so that they would sleep all the way until they got home. Well, they were just in a dozy state, and it was terrible. They had to fly another plane out for us, and anyhow, they flew the other plane, so we were late. There was poor Mum and Dad waiting at the other end, had to wait another day for me. But that was the end of that tour, and I'd arranged, whilst I was on that tour, that I would leave that company and go into the smaller company, the second company. The other company was the smaller company, which was Sadler's Wells in Rosebery Avenue, in the little theatre there. That's where they did, and there's opera there as well in Rosebery Avenue. A much smaller company, did much more travelling than the other, but I was told if I changed companies, I would have more opportunities of maybe doing some solo work. And I actually changed companies, and I didn't realise, and I wasn't told it until my first pay packet came. I became a soloist as I went in, so I got more money, which was wonderful. I think I was on £6.10 in the first company, and I went up to, I think £10. Yes. Mind you, when you think you had your digs to pay for and everything else to pay for. But still, I went in as a sort of soloist, not quite, but sort of soloist, and I was being paid then. And I joined the company in Morecambe. Oh, I can remember the weather was terrible. It was damp, snowy, foggy, everything. And Dad took me down there, and he could hardly see where we were going. It was so foggy. I felt so worried about them leaving me and going back. And my digs, oh, the bed was so wet. The bed was actually wet. I bought a big overcoat, all sort of lined. I slept in my overcoat. I was just so cold. And I met some of the company members there. The other person who came with me was my friend Diane Foran. She came into that second company at the same time. So I had one friend, and then I'd only been in the company a short time, and Peggy Van Prague, who was our director, said to me, "We've got a young girl coming from the school. I wonder if you'd look after her for us." And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." "Fine, yes. How old is she?" And she said, 18. And I said, "I'm only 19. "Oh, I thought you were much older." I'd been in the company, you see, this was my 4th year in the company. 4th? No, 3rd. But anyhow, so this girl was Dorinda coming from the school, and she was just a delight. I just fell in love with her. She was just gorgeous. She was like a little sister. And I looked after her and wrote for digs for her. So we're in digs together. And she belonged to a lovely family, a big family of 4 boys. She was the youngest with 4 boys. She was actually Madam's one of the little star pupils at the school. She was going to do big things. Very, very clever girl, but just delightful, full of fun. So I had this lovely new friend, which was gorgeous, and I was made part of her family, because when we were in London, I would be invited down there. So I became part of that family, which was lovely as well for me. Yeah, and soon we did one tour, I think, Dorinda and I, one tour sort of around England, and then we went to South Africa. That was our next thing, big thing. We went to South Africa, and we went on the Athlone Castle, I think it was. We went by boat. That was wonderful. 2 weeks, I think it took us to do that. We did classes and rehearsals on the boat. We took up nearly all the work, well, first class, but the other class, we took about all that on the boat with the company. So there was a first class section and then us. So we took over. And, it was fun, dancing at night and ballroom dancing up and down as the boat went up and down. But that was great fun. So we went on the Athlone Castle. We arrived in Johannesburg. We started. But the minute we arrived, the atmosphere there it wasn't like America. I mean, America the people were wonderful. They really were. They were friendly. They looked after us. Johannesburg was different altogether. I don't know, I just didn't like the atmosphere, and the way they treated the coloured people was disgusting. We'd had to leave behind one of our members of the company. We had a lot of South Africans in the company, but one, Joha, was coloured. He was the only one that was coloured. The others, I think, were white-skinned, but Joha was coloured. He was Indian, and he had to be left behind because he wouldn't be allowed to perform in the theatre. So we had to leave him behind. And which was sad, which was awful. And you could sort of feel that atmosphere all the time. Anyhow, when we were asked out, we weren't treated like we were treated in America. We were treated with respect. The boys used to take us out, and we had a lovely time, but not in South Africa. And if we were asked out, everybody seemed to be outdoing each other. A lot of drinking, an awful lot of drinking. We didn't drink. We weren't drinkers. So yes, it was lovely country. We went to Durban. Durban was where Joha came from, and we invited his parents to come and stand in the wings so we could show them what Joha did, you know, and explain to them what he did. We had some of our own stagehands, but the South Africans nearly went on strike because we had these two dear people, little people watching. And I don't know, awful. Anyhow, they invited us, his parents and family invited us to their home. And they wanted to, what would they be? What religion would they be? They did all these demonstrations of walking on hot coals, walking through hot coals, putting skewers through their tongues, through their cheeks. It's amazing. They did a whole sort of enactment for us. One of the boys passed out. It was really amazing, and they didn't feel any pain or anything. And they fed us as well. They gave us food. I suppose we shouldn't really have gone, I suppose, but we did. And it was fascinating. Durban was a little bit better. Johannesburg was the worst, but Cape Town was different altogether. Cape Town was lovely, and a different feeling towards the coloured people. And we stayed with friends, actually, of one of the South African boys. And they were lovely, and they had a coloured lady working for them. And they treated her with such respect. It was lovely. That was really nice there. And then, whilst I was in Cape Town, my then boyfriend, who was a boyfriend from the other company, Brian Ashbridge, we hardly knew each other, but we'd been out, I think, once. We knew each other, and then he'd asked me out on a date once before I changed companies. And he'd came here to Australia, and I think New Zealand, with Margot, and his partner was Rowena Jackson, who was New Zealander, and Michael Soames, I suppose. Anyhow, they'd gone on a short tour, and Brian said, "Oh, I'll come from Australia and to South Africa and come home on the boat with you," which he arranged. And so there in Cape Town, Brian arrives, my boyfriend. And I wasn't sort of really ready for it because I was beginning to do solos. I was beginning to get some nice little parts. And he was a lovely person. He was a really lovely person. But we had fun. We had fun on the boat coming back. And then he came back to Mum and Dad's afterwards. And I just said, I just wasn't ready. Because I would have had to change companies again. And then I would have just been Brian's wife. I wouldn't have been Yvonne English. I would have been Brian's wife and just not doing the things I was doing there. I was already doing things like Prelude in Sylphide, which is beautiful, and Prayer in Capelia, and Red Girls in Patina, and the wife in Blood Wedding. That was a dramatic part. And yeah, I wouldn't have done any of those things in the big company. It's just too big, different altogether. So yes, I broke it off. I broke it off with Brian. But funnily enough, when I came out here, we reconnected and we became really good friends. And he's long gone now, but I'm really friendly with his wife. So there's still that connection there. But yes, going back to South Africa, yes, then came back from South Africa and just tours. We went to Spain, and yes, and she talks about Spain, we went to Barcelona. Yeah, it's all a little bit vague, and yeah, I went to Granada. Those performances were in open-air theatres out in the, our dressing rooms were open air and the stage was in the open air. Beautiful settings. But I can remember one of the girls went to put a costume on. There were ants going through the costume. She nearly had hysterics. And the heat, I used to find that my feet would swell a lot in the heat, so, you know, uncomfortable. Dancing in the heat like that, out in the open air. And late at night, that was the other thing, late at night. Everybody had siestas, didn't they? But it was hard for us to readjust, but beautiful. We also went to Switzerland. That's another tour we did. We went to Switzerland, and that was beautiful. Went to Germany. Went through Paris. We didn't dance in Paris, we went through Paris. Those were all quite hard tours. There wasn't a lot of money, so yeah, we didn't stay in lovely hotels and things. In fact, I can remember one hotel we stayed in Spain. It was terrible. There were all these awful men with the doors open and all sitting just in the... as we went by, they were all making catcalls at us, and we hardly dared move out of our room. So I rang John Field, the director, because we had young girls there, and I said, we can't stay here. I think it's a brothel. And anyhow, he came down and looked, and he said, no, you can't stay here. It's quite true. And booked us in his hotel. So my lovely friend Susie and I were in this lovely hotel. Oh, beautiful, lovely hotel. Yes, and then, whilst we were there in Barcelona, I befriended a little girl. She came around for an autograph, and she spoke a little bit of French, and I tried to speak a little bit of French back to her. And how she brought her, I don't know who it was a relative, it was a gentleman. And he said he would like to take us out with the little girl, with Maria. And he spoke English, that was fine. And so Sue and I never went, and you never went anywhere by yourself, you always went with your friend. So Sue and I went with this lovely gentleman who we called, I don't know what his name was, we called him Gentilhomme. He was such a gentleman. I think he was Portuguese actually, and he had been a bullfighter. But he took us to all the, touristy places, all the lovely places to have a look. He really was so kind to us. He also gave us beautiful Spanish dolls each, which was lovely. And yeah, he gave us really a wonderful time. She writes about it in her book. So that was Spain. Otherwise, it was just touring around England, 10 weeks at a time, living out of a suitcase. No washing facilities, no laundrettes. You just washed your undies and things and hung them up in the dressing room. Can you imagine what the dressing room was like? They were all with dripping clothes all over the place. Yes, I don't know how we managed actually, but we did, and we just lived out of our suitcases for the 10 weeks. I can remember one tour where it was just grey and miserable the whole tour. Then we got to Oxford and the sun came out. I can remember that so clearly. So you can tell what the rest of the tour was like. And the sun came out, and I can remember putting on a dress, and being out in the sun. Yeah, those were hard, the tour. And we performed twice on a Wednesday and twice on a Saturday, rehearsed all day, travelled on a Sunday. Travelling on a Sunday, you can imagine what that was like. You'd be shunted into a siding and then have to change trains to get on another train. We would be on a train all day, travelling to the next place. And then you had your suitcase, and you had to find your new digs. And we'd arrive at our new digs. Funnily enough, we always, on a Sunday night, the thing to do was we'd go into our new digs, have some tea there, and then all meet at cinema, and we'd all go to the pictures on a Sunday night. And that was our little treat, going to the pictures. And then next morning, finding the new theatre and feeling your way around the new theatre and the new stage, because each stage is different, the layouts are different, and sometimes you were cramped, sometimes you had a rake, which was, for pirouettes and things like that, you had to change your weight completely, lean backwards, which was tricky. Some stages were terrible. Some were just planks on concrete. No wonder we had injuries, you know. However, that was it in those days. It's not like that now. They travel with their own floor, which they lay down wherever they are, like a rubberized floor. So it's always the same. Yes, it's always the same, and always has. Yeah, much. But I don't think they have the camaraderie that we had. And I know that my friend, little Patty Cox, who came and joined the Australian Ballet when she came, she said she never again found that wonderful comrade, that wonderful warm feeling that we had in both the companies. I think because the women who ruled us so much that we clung together, do you know what I mean? We had Peggy Van Prague, Madam. I was terrified of Madam, but I admired her, and she never shouted. She was never rude, she was never nasty. She just put you down by saying, "Who's that child over there?" You'd been in the company 3 years, you darned well knew your name. But it was always, "Who's that child? Get back in line!" Get back in line, English. But Peggy Van Prague was quite different. She put you down by telling you all your faults. So, you know, "Pity, darling, your neck is so long. Pity, a pity, darling, and your smile is much too big, much too big." So, oh dear, well, I'll try not to smile then in future. And what do I do about my neck? You know, I can't do much about my neck. And then, you know, Mike Bolton, "It's a pity, Mike, your arms are much too short." So we all had things wrong with us. So Maddie, my lovely friend Maddie, was really good at cartoons. She made this little book, it was called The Glove Club. And we were all in it. There was me with my long neck and my big smile, and there was Mike with his little short arms. We all had something wrong with us. We're all in this glove club. Then you could laugh about it, couldn't you? Then you could laugh about it. The other lovely thing about the company was if ever you were doing a solo for the first time, everybody would send you either a little note or a little gift or a little bar of chocolate. There were only a little pottery thing or something with a little note on. I've got them all. "Good luck for so-and-so, Vonnie," and I've got them all. I've kept them all in a box, because you don't throw your good luck away, do you? But that's what it was like. It was just such a lovely, warm, loving company. And when I left, I actually hadn't said I would not keep. I've forgotten when I left now. But I'd had an ankle injury for ages, and I was really having trouble. I said I'd have to leave the end of 1 year, and I backed out and said, "No, I'll stick it out another year and see if it'll get better." It was a stress fracture, and I stuck it out another year, and then I left. But I think that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I left all my friends behind, my way of life, what I'd talked about and lived for the last, lot of years. I had to leave that all behind. And I went home. Mum and Dad were wonderful. They were always wonderful. And yeah, it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I had to reinvent myself in a way. And I think I stayed home 3 years. I had several jobs. I worked in a smelting factory as an assistant to the people who buy all the different metals. You know, the metals the stuff would come in from Bolivia and places with tin and sludge in it, and we'd have to assay it, and I'd have to assay it and work out how much it was worth. And I worked there for about a year, I think, maybe a bit longer. And then I decided I wanted to do something really worthwhile, so I said I'd try and do nursing. I got in, I started nursing, and I did love it. I really loved nursing. Student nurse, earning £2.10 a week again, but you lived in free. And I had to, get on with younger girls, but they were lovely. But I did really love the nursing. I loved the nursing side of it. And then I did it for about 18 months, and then we had a girl come in who was attempted suicide. We had to walk her up and down in those days. You had to walk them until you wore it off. They don't do that now, I don't think. But anyhow, we got her over it. She was all right. She was only 18. She was a lovely young girl. And she was going home the next day. We went in, had a chat with her. Only 2 of us on duty. We went in, had a chat with her. As we walked back to our little room where we sat, night work it was, night duty, there was this tremendous crash. And we ran back, and she'd thrown herself through the window. The windows couldn't open for that reason. They only opened a crack, but she threw herself through the window. And the other girl just went to pieces, and they let her go home and left me on my own on duty all night, because I was calm and in control. But it really got to me later on. It really worked. And I'd also got myself entangled with an Indian doctor. So I decided I'd leave. I'd leave. And I went back to London. My brother's wife was having her 4th baby and needed help, so I went back to London and went to live with them. I lived under the piano. Had a bed under the piano until I found digs for myself. Yeah, and then I did all sorts of things in London. Well, I helped Georgie a lot. I helped with the children, but then I got myself a job in a place called, what was it called? It was the very first exercise gymnasium for ladies. What was it called? I can't remember. But it was American. It was all pink carpet. It was all pink. It was all lush. And they held auditions for it. And so I went along, and again, there was about masses of people. So they said, just fill in a form. And I was like, I won't get this. So I filled in my form. I said, I've been a nurse. I've also been with the Royal Ballet, so I think I'm ideal for this job. And I got called back. And I got in. Figurine, that's what it was called, and it was on Regent Street, right in the middle of Regent Street. And I got the job, and there it was, this first fitness thing for ladies. And I enjoyed it. It was lovely, actually. It had lovely little uniforms, little pink tops and trousers. It was all very, very smart. And I did really like it, and I loved taking the ladies round and chatting to them. There were some lovely ladies who used to come round. And but then they started pushing to sell, and Americans are so different in business, are so different to English. And yet they had to sell, and you had to cheat, you had to measure so that their arm looked fatter, and then when you measured next time tighter. They taught you how to cheat. And yeah, I said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I can't tell lies to these ladies. They're lovely ladies, and I can't lie to them. And so I didn't get any promotions. Eventually, because they kept on at me, but it was good money. It was £14 a week. I had never earned £14 a week before. It was really good money. So I left there, and then I got a job with a dentist as a receptionist. And that was fine. I stayed with him, and then a lady came in who had a ballet school along the Finchley Road. And the dentist said, oh, my assistant used to be with the Royal Ballet. And she said, oh, would you like to come and teach for me? So I said, yes, I think I would. So I left the dentist and I went to teach. And it was really good for me because I started teaching, and then she wanted me to to get my qualifications back, my RAD, Royal Academy of Dancing qualifications back, I had to retake my exams because I'd let my subscription go. And so I got back, I started dancing again. And I passed my elementary with honours, and I thought, oh, I'm enjoying this, I'll go on and do the next one. I'd passed my intermediate with honours, I passed my advanced with honours. It was such fun. I started going to outside classes with a lovely, lovely Russian lady. Well, I don't think she was Russian. She taught in a Russian style, Maria Fay. And started doing outside classes and started dancing again. My feet had mended in that rest in the meantime. And she auditioned me to get back into another ballet company, the Northern Ballet Company. The man came and watched class. But in the meantime, I'd met Frank. He was a friend of the secretary at the ballet school. And yeah, I had sort of fallen hook, line and sinker for him. Anyhow, I told him I'd been offered this. I knew I couldn't be married and tour around, it just wouldn't work. So it sort of pushed him into asking me to marry him. And so I married Frank. I didn't join the ballet company, I married Frank. And yeah, the rest is history. Yeah, and then he'd come out with the Hungarian, you know, all the Hungarian upset. So he was stateless. And he wanted to come to Australia. So he came to Australia as a stateless person and then became Australian. And he was fun, he was a character, and I had 3 lovely children from him, so there you go. Yeah. So I think that's my life story. I'll remember something I've forgotten to tell you.